first time that we've been able to reach out to all of you who are unable to be here physically. We miss you, and we look forward to joining you in the new year ahead. I also want to welcome Dr. Stanley Wicks, who is our new choir director. He is also regularly, when he is not here for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, choir director at the First United Methodist Church in Mission Valley. And so far, A+. Thank you as well to our choir, magnificent as always, Anthony. I remember the first time I stood gazing upon the Constitution of the United States. Behind its protected glass, it was badly worn and barely readable. Yet despite the cruelty that the years had had upon its physical beauty in that moment, as I stood trying to decipher its words and acutely aware of how central it was to everything that I held dear as an American, I was simply overwhelmed with emotion, and my tears freely fell. How powerful this thing was before me. What an effect it had on shaping the life I had lived to that point. Knowing generations before me had wrestled and studied and brought forth new interpretations from its hallowed principles, even as my generation continued that conversation in our own age. How beautiful and precious was this frail and fading document, a thing of our people, a guarantee by our people, a legacy for our people. How many freedoms had been celebrated by its words? How many immigrants began a new life pledging to it their allegiance? How many lives have been given for its protection? As a collection of old sheets of parchment, it wasn't and still would not be worth very much. But for its history and its place in our lives, its value was and will always remain beyond measure. America would not be America without our Constitution. Our Constitution would be meaningless if not for its citizenry, who, if not for calling it our Constitution, might otherwise call it our Torah. Once when the Jewish people lived in a very dark time of great oppression, when to study Torah was away from the scrutiny of Roman authority, let alone in public, was considered an act of high sedition, punishable by death. Many were the sages of the day who defied the Romans' orders and carried on to teach despite the threat of danger. One of the greatest of these sages was the beloved Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, a man known and admired not only for his brilliant wisdom in the ways of Torah, but for his love of God's teachings. Beginning his studies at the age of 40, overcoming hardship upon hardship, only to become one of the most revered of our sages, Rosh Hashanah, head of all sages. And those very days, when the Romans were guaranteed to be on the streets on market days, when the chance of reaching the people was greatest, Rabbi Akiva would find a place in the square, open a scroll, and teach his disciples and those who dared to join together with him from its principles. One day, when word had spread through the crowd that a cadre of soldiers were on their way, Rabbi Akiva's students gathered around him and urged him to roll up the scroll, to leave off from his teaching, to secret away to a place the soldiers could not find him. The rabbi refused and instead offered them a parable. "I appreciate your love for me and your desire for my safety," he softly responded. "But what is this thing comparable to that you ask me to do?" It's comparable to a fox by a river that is laden with fish. Knowing that he can't himself swim, the clever fox devises a plan by which to lure the fish onto the shore. Calling to the fish, he warns them of having seen a boat full of fishermen, each of them laden with spears and with hooks. They are only a couple of bends up the stream, he says. Very soon, the fishermen with their spears will be upon you, and you will be helpless before them. But if you want, you could jump onto the shore, and out of the goodness of my heart, I will carry you to safety until the fishermen have passed. But the fish ignored the pleas of the fox, and he turned away to think it through again. Not much time had passed before the fox once again came to the shore and called to the fish, I've gone to check in that boat full of fishermen. They're closer now than before. They're only a bend away. You are in mortal danger. Jump now, where I can take you up and away to safety until they pass. But the fish seemed indifferent to his concern. The fox again went into the bushes for a short while, only to return with such sincere concern and panic in his voice that one could not possibly mistake his intentions for anything other than the most pure and sincere. This time, having been assured by the fox that the fishermen were but 100 feet from where they were, the leader of the fish poked his head above the water and replied to the fox, we are most moved by your obvious concern for us, and we take you up on your offer, except for the fact that we cannot live out of water. And should we leap onto the shore, we will surely die. Better it is that we take our chances with the spears and the hooks. Knowing that he had been beat, the fox sulked away. This, my beloved students, is comparable to what you have asked me to do, said Rabbi Akiva. Indeed, the advancing Romans present a mortal danger. But a Jew without Torah is like a fish without water. It is the very lifeblood. It is the air that we breathe. It is the sustenance of our lives. A life for us without Torah would be our certain end. It is better that we take our chances with the spears and the hooks of the Romans. Rabbi Akiva was one of our greatest teachers. He was also one of the many martyrs of those terrible years. He was ultimately taken by the Romans, tried for sedition, flayed with hooks, and tortured till his very last breath. The scroll of the Torah that he refused to cease from teaching, wrapped around him and set aflame. To the end, he taught Torah. His last words to his students as they stood helpless and aggrieved. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Even in his final words, the rabbi taught Torah. Grateful, even in his pain, that he had found a final lesson. He taught the meaning of it with all my heart, with all of my might, and with all of my soul. Write down this song and teach it to the people of Israel. This is the final commandment found in the book of Deuteronomy. Learn it, write it, do it. And as we have come to discover, to do so is really the most unique, the most spiritual, the most profoundly moving of all Jewish experiences. Moses himself wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. One each he gave to the 12 tribes, and the last he stored in the Ark of the Covenant. Together on Sinai and along the wilderness journey, God would dictate each passage of the Torah to Moses. Moses would then repeat it aloud. He would then write it down. God would dictate a paragraph to Moses and then give him a break in order to consider it. And wherever he paused, he set a break in the text, dividing it into the paragraphs that we see today. And yet even for having received the Torah from God himself, Moses could only understand the principles of his generation. Rabbi Yehud said in the name of Rav, when Moses ascended Mount Sinai, he saw God sitting and tying gagim, or crowns, to 7 particular letters wherever they appeared. The crowns were composed of 3 hair-width strokes, the length of a squirrel's quid, and it resembled the letter Zion. Seeing this, Moses was confused, and he asked God, why do these letters need crowns? God replied, because there is a man many generations in the future who will rise. His name will be Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. And he will expound mountains of teachings for each and every crown of every letter that I affix. Excited, Moses asked that he be shown the great sage, and God said, turn around. In an instant, Moses found himself in the back of Rabbi Akiva's class. And taking a seat in the 8th row of students, he listened intently. But he could make neither hide nor hair of what they were discussing. He was immediately depressed and disheartened. The class then asked Rabbi Akiva about a certain matter of his lesson pertaining to the crowns affixed to the 7 types of letters. And when Rabbi Akiva explained that they resembled daggers meant to bind the prosecuting angels, and thus to protect the children of Israel when answering for our misdeeds, the class asked him for the source of his teaching, and the rabbi replied, "It is a teaching that is taught through Moses at Sinai." Bewildered, and knowing that God had never taught him this lesson, Moses stood up and he turned around, and once again on Sinai, Moses looked to God and asked, "If you have someone as learned as this, why to me are you giving Torah?" And God replied, "Be still. For it is my intention that what you begin will continue to inspire learning and life and guide my people as they grow." What then is Torah? What did Moses begin? Known as law, known also as teaching, and in large part able to be called our Constitution. It is in reality but a book, 5 books sewn together in an ancient style, utilizing materials that in most societies are worth very little. The skins of animals otherwise to be thrown away, the quills of birds found on the way, ink made from common materials, some of which we would never guess the purpose for in a million years. It is not constructed from the rarest of metals or the finest of woods or the most precious of stones, but from the commonest of materials we can find. Yet it is, without question, the most precious possession of our people. It is the first acquisition of a fledgling community. It is danced with and embraced and kissed and blessed and protected and regaled with honor and joy. The sum of money is expended to engage a sofer, a scribe. It is not the bill for its labor that makes a Torah precious. It is the labor itself. It is the love and the dedication and the purpose with which he labors that makes it precious. It is the immutable tradition that he carries forward in his soul. As he will tell you, from its very first writing, from the mouth of Adonai, through the hand of Moses, placed in the Ark of the Covenant. The scribe is no ordinary individual. His life is one of constant humility. Selfless piety must be his lamp. 4,000 laws pertaining to the task of writing the Torah are his to master, and they appear before his eyes every night as he retires, every morning as he wakes. His calling is before him as he rests by the way when he goes out. The scribe purifies himself in thought and in deed. He daily visits the cleansing waters of the mikvah. His blessings are said to remind him that the work he does is for the sanctification of God's holy word and no purpose besides. It is for the sake of fulfilling God's final command that he labors on behalf of those such as we, unable to master or devote all that is required. He will labor until a year has passed, filling 62 sheets, 248 columns, 10,416 lines, revealing 304,805 letters of sacred scripture. The Sofer knows with what he is entrusted the duty of safeguarding the precise transmission of Torah from generation to generation as carried out by those before him. It is a monumental duty for which he must anguish both in body and soul over every mark of his foot. He sets his mind, he sets his eyes, he sets his hands to this task, and to every single stroke that he will make, ever aware that the very existence of even the slightest of errors would threaten an unbroken continuum of tradition. Think how one misdrawn letter might spell a different word, shape a different understanding, and change forever what God had intended. Ready and prepared before he begins, he sings each word before it is written. And as he writes each word, he sings its letters one by one before writing them, putting quill to parchment, all to ensure that no mistake is made. He cannot rely on memory. He copies the Torah from a master scroll upon which every other Torah is crafted. With over 100 laws for the letters themselves, each stroke becomes an act of devotion, and each crown is a hymn of glory to God. He writes with ink so black that it shines from deep within. He writes with black fire upon fire of white, the elements used when writing the Sifrot of the wilderness. And knowing that the ink is made with the gift of God's creations, the gallnut, for one, produced by the oak tree in response to the sting of a wasp, knowing that the tree swelled around the sting, knowing that the wasp had used the swollen branch to nestle her eggs, knowing that the nut had protected her young. The scribe is mindful of how Torah too protects the children of Israel. He is aware that the letters of black fire represent what is fixed and rational, while the spaces of white fire that hold them in place catapult us into realms of the limitless, the ever-growing and the changing story of our people, the song that is our people's journey, and is also at times that mystical silence. The handcrafted quill that he uses, he holds in his hand, is also a gift of creation. For Ashkenazim, it is left by birds to be gathered on the ground. For Sephardim, they are reeds from the earth to be picked as their respective contribution to the Torah's writing. The quill is fashioned to span the distance between his outstretched thumb and his little finger. The distance in divine dimensions that God is said to have measured out the expanse of the heavens. And hence he is humbly aware of how all creation was brought into being in the Torah to serve as its blueprint. It is hallowed such that when writing the name of God, you will hold enough ink to write God's name with a single measured dip. He is mindful that God is one and indivisible. So holy is this singular task that whenever he is about to write the name of God, he will declare, "Behold, I write this for the sake of the holiness of God." Even the parchment he writes on is prepared expressly for this word, this act, and is also a gift of tradition, of creation. In some traditions, it is the gift of the deer, in others the gazelle, in others the calf, yet others the gift of the goat or the sheep. The sofer is aware that it comes only from an animal that is permissible for us to eat, reminding him again how Torah is meant to be so close to us that, as we will read on Yom Kippur, it is in our very mouths. No iron, the metal of weaponry and war, has touched it in its preparations. This Torah is meant to be an instrument of peace. When he is finished, every letter must be checked to make sure that its form is correct. Every word must be checked to make sure of its spelling. The layout must be checked to ensure that the text is clearly divided into the requisite number of paragraphs. Again and again, the process is repeated before a Torah is finally ready to be welcomed home and consecrated to a new task. My friends, to every Torah scroll there is a history. Not only the workings of its beginnings, and all of the lore, and all of the story, and all of the ritual, and all of the tradition that goes into it. But unique to every Torah scroll's history are the legacies and the stories of all who have touched and been touched by its teachings from the moment it arrives in the sanctuary. Celebrations and life cycle moments, moments of inspiration and promise, and sometimes also moments of tragedy. Our temple has been entrusted with 4 separate legacy scrolls from around the world, including a community destroyed by the Holocaust. All 4 of their stories is primarily unknown to us, except that collectively they represent over 1,000 years of Jewish communal involvement. Were they commissioned by an individual, by a congregation who was present as they were welcomed to the shul, whose hands were the hands that rolled out the portions and traced the yod below the words as they were sung? Whose were the tears that stained their pages? Whose were the arms that tried to shield them? Whose were the hands that reached out to touch them, bringing fingers to their lips with heartfelt devotion? And who paved the way that generations from their day, they would now be prized and celebrated by us and rest in our heart? Most likely we will never know. We're now 36 years old. Our community has reached a time when our generation can add the story of our own unique history to theirs, with a Sefer Torah that is born of our own experiences and dreams. And unlike in generations past, our experience is being recorded. Generations from now, centuries from now, the record of our Torah will still be alive. We, my friends, are taking part in a once-in-a-lifetime moment, linking each and every member of this holy congregation, whether homebound or not, to every other Jew who has celebrated with the Torah in a joyous dance, who has ever risked their life to protect it from the savages of hate, who has ever defiled persecution to perpetuate its study, who has ever sat and studied, struggled and taught its values and its precepts, inspiring new understanding for generations to come. We are joining in the sacred task this year forever entering you and me and our children into the living, breathing, evolving history of our people, we are rising to sign our name to the basis of all that our people hold sacred, all that defines us and all that guides us. What a gift we shall know in this year ahead. For as we are taught, the people without Torah is like a body without a soul. Neither of us has meaning, one without the other. Tonight, we begin to give light to each of our Jewish neshamot. Our prayer is that our lights joined together will give light to generations to come. We shall enjoy another gift in the year ahead. Because this was perhaps the longest sermon I've ever given in my life. The rest of them, I promise, will be short. I do invite you certainly to take up this brochure before you go. It is our new and updated Torah brochure, new information. We want everyone, no matter how you make, to be involved in its writing. The opportunity is so full of holiness, so full of creativity, so full of passion. So much of a once-in-a-lifetime chance, the opportunity. It's not something to pass by when it comes to you. It is sacred. You add your name to its holiness. God bless you. Shall not forget.